Well, the spoiler-free portion of this review is going to be pretty dang short, but it's been out for a week and everyone else has already seen it. So I'm late to this party, so heck with it. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Here is your spoiler-free version. My feelings on this at time of recording are mixed. Basically, there are some parts that work well. There's one story aspect that works excellently. There's a bunch of stuff that is fine, some of which is not really to my taste, but it's fine. There's one thing that just has no business being there, and in any rational world just would have been removed. And then there's a whole bunch of nitpicky stuff that kept pulling me out of the movie that I may well be the only one who cares about it and the only one whose viewing experience was particularly hampered by these things. So that's your short version. I will say before I get into and it's not like I'm going to dive directly into spoilers, but after I finish up what I'm about to say, I'm just going to talk about the movie, and spoilers will come up as they do. But the thing is, I'm not going to. This review should not be considered my definitive statement on the film, because honestly, it took me a little while to appreciate everything going on in the second one. And my first impression of Guardians Volume 2 was that, oh, it's about as good as the first one, but it's not as new and doesn't feel as fresh. So yeah, I guess it's a little worse. But coming to appreciate the emotional depth of that, I now think it's actually quite a bit better than the first one. So it's distinctly possible that my feelings and opinions on this might change, hopefully for the better. But right now, yeah, pretty mixed. So that's your spoiler-free section. Now I'm just going to talk pretty freely about the thing. Why don't we start with what's good? Well, Gamora is well handled. What happened with Gamora in this movie is exactly what should happen, given the character and the circumstances she's in, which is that her whole thing is being pissed off at Quill for trying to treat her like she's the old version of Gamora that he knew, when she is fundamentally and literally not the same person. Like, their divergent point is significant. You can't treat her like she had these years worth of experience when she freaking didn't. She's not the person who had those experiences. And thankfully, the film doesn't really go with the idea that, oh, and maybe like it kind of hints that she kind of has this sense of like, yeah, I can see why we worked, but it doesn't go further than that. At least not to my reading, which is good, because Quill's important lesson to take from this is don't try and shove someone into fit the hole that has been left in your heart by the last person you lost, because that's effectively what he was trying to do. So that's well handled. And also, thankfully, I had a terrible moment where I was like, oh God, they're not going to hook him up with Nebula, are they? And I should have guessed that, they just made a joke out of that. The thing that I mentioned that's excellent, Rocket, especially the flashback stuff with Rocket, is really good and really affecting. Like, I cried, like straight up, I cried a couple times, either from those sections directly or from payoffs related to those sections. Really well done. It's just good. And it's heartbreaking, and it's tragic, and it really gets you to understand him as a character. It's good stuff. There's all the stuff that's fine. The constant bickering, especially between Drax and Mantis, which, like, I get they're kind of going for like a two siblings that get on each other's nerves kind of dynamic with them. And like, I get that's what it is, but speaking as an only child, I've never really found that dynamic particularly endearing, because I don't especially relate to it. So, that doesn't do a whole ton to me. It felt like there was a bit more cringeworthy moments with Quill in terms of like how often he would try and pitch something to Gamora, and they do undercut some of the cringe moments, like to make it seem like he's doing something cringy, but actually he's like covering for something else he's doing. I'm like, okay. But there were more than a few moments where, like, if you're ever watching a movie with me, you can tell when we hit a cringe moment, because I will take my glasses off and basically watch it blurry intentionally because I'm trying to disconnect somewhat from what I'm watching on screen. So I did do that a couple times watching this movie, and it were pretty much all Quill moments. So yeah, there's that. There's an issue also that isn't really the fault of this movie, but still kind of makes it a little bit less of a slightly lesser experience than it could have been, which is that at this point, the tone of Guardians of the Galaxy, the rollicking adventure undercut with comedy, has become the standard Marvel tone. Not absolutely everything in Marvel does this, but an increasingly high percentage of Marvel properties do this. And at the time that Guardians of the Galaxy, and even when the second one came out, it was more unique. And now it feels like the standard template. So had this movie been released back when it was supposed to, before the whole debacle with James Gunn getting fired, and then he went to DC, and then he got rehired to come in and do this, and now he's back at DC. Before all that happened, if it had just been filmed when it was supposed to be, then the timing of this would feel less like, oh, so it's the standard Marvel movie thing. Because this format and this approach hadn't become the standard template yet. So that's not really the movie's fault, but it is an unfortunate side effect. So I said there was something that just shouldn't be there. And that's Adam Warlock. Like, I've literally seen this joke made a number of places, but it does truly feel like James Gunn introduced the idea of Adam Warlock in the post-credit scene after the second one. And one of two things happened. Either he thought he was going to pick up on that, but then decided he would rather focus on a Rocket instead, and then just, didn't know what to do with Adam. Or he introduced him legitimately thinking some other franchise was going to pick up the character and run with him, and he wouldn't be the one who had to do it. In either case, the end result is a character who just has no business being there. Like, I would literally forget that he's even in this movie until he would come crashing into the film again, often literally. And, they try, they have him save Quill at the end, but, even that feels super contrived because the situation that Quill has to be saved from is just this thing that happens at the very last minute that, just could have not, and he wouldn't have required saving. So, it's just the Adam Warlock. And the thing is, the character approach to Adam, the performance, the look, none of it's bad. He just has no business being here. And he's been integrated really poorly. You can see the stitches where he's been sewn into this thing. And no. This is Frankensteining in this character. And why? Just drop him. Just drop him. So I haven't talked about the villain, the High Evolutionary, yet. On some levels, he's really good. This is a guy with a God complex, and the whole sense of ownership he has over anything he creates sort of brings to mind, the most possessive sort of tools of the business world. And I love that he runs a corporation. He's not an emperor. He doesn't have he doesn't have a religion based around him, although, it's said some people treat him like he's a god. But no, he owns a corporation. That feels deliberate. And that he treats people, beings, things that are sentient, things that are alive, like assets, like his property, his intellectual property, to do with as he pleases. It's severe. I was going to say dehumanization, but obviously Rocket and a lot of the others we see aren't human. So maybe denial of personhood might be a better term. And that all fits, and that works really well. By the tail end, he's mostly just shouting. And that felt like a little bit of a degradation of him as a character. Like the climax and the final fight with him, that's quite satisfying. So like that works. But I said like the last third, he's mostly just shouting, and he kind of lost some of the underlying stuff that had been going on under the surface that made him a little bit more interesting. But he's fine as far as villains go. He's functional. I did mention there are some things that that maybe don't bother anybody else, but bothered me and kind of took me out of it a bit. And again, some of these are going to admittedly be nitpicks, but they still took me out of it. There were just a lot of little moments that felt like a joke was put there or something was just changed without consideration for the state of the world and the state of these characters. So let me start with what I would consider the least offensive, like the most innocuous thing. It was a big gag in the second one that Drax's nipples were super sensitive. That's why he never wore a shirt. But here he's got a thing on. It's like a vest, and that he's got a jacket. Like he's wearing top coverings. Now, on the one hand, I'm not saying we had to keep having the character appear shirtless. If Dave Bautista doesn't want to do that anymore, he should not be required to do that. He does not have to expose his body in that way if he no longer desires to do so. But, a throwaway bit of dialogue mentioned that, like, Rocket made new cloth that doesn't chafe his nipples, or, like, made him little tiny nipple sized force fields that are just there now. Like, that's something. Because that was like a recurring thing in the previous one, but now he's just in shirts. So okay, again, like that doesn't really matter, but it starts a snowball effect. Because then there's stuff like, why do some of these alien creatures know Earth terminology for things? Like, I'll accept that they just all happen to speak English, which also makes no sense, but that's a convention of the genre. It's fine. But, like, how does Sylvester Stallone's Ravager know what a hedgehog is? How does this version of Gamora know what a carrot is? She says some guy has a carrot head. Carrots are native to Earth. How do you know what a carrot is? Like, I can give some leeway to this, like a little bit. Like when Mantis, I can get why maybe Mantis knows what a monkey is, because like she's been around Quill, and like she and Drax even went to Earth in the holiday special. So like maybe the Guardians who have been around Quill have more of a sense of these things. But Gamora, this version of Gamora shouldn't know anything. Adam Warlock, why does he know what a squirrel is? Like, what? Why do these people know what these things are? And I know it doesn't matter. It's casual dialogue. But every time it came up, and it comes up a lot, that these alien beings keep referencing stuff that they shouldn't know what that is. And even like accepting the idea of like, well, there are all these creatures from Earth that like say the High Evolutionary is messing with. So maybe somehow they're related to it like that. But the High Evolutionary doesn't refer to them by names, by genus, by species. They're all numbers to him. So why would that information have spread outside of whatever the heck the company's name was? I don't know. Like, the thing is, it doesn't matter, but part of my brain really latched onto that. It really took me out of the movie. And then there's the thing that actively ticked me off. Now, anyone who watches my Doctor Who reviews, in particular my Take Two Doctor Who reviews, of series 11 and 12 of Doctor Who, one of my recurrent complaints about the Chris Chibnall era was needless cruelty and unnecessary death. And James, Mr. Gunn, I'm not okay with the fact that you destroyed a populated planet where it was very firmly established. These are families. These are children analogous to Earth. They just happen to be part animal. I'm really not okay with that. And if anyone's going to try and tell me, like, well, you have to show how bad the high evolutionary is going to be by having him do this. No, you freaking don't, because how bad he was going to be was already well established with the flashbacks we got when we saw what he did to Rocket and what he did to Lila, to Teefs, and to Floor. We know how bad he is. I believe, like, you can have him threaten to do it. I believe that he will do it. You do not have to have him show us that he will do it, because it does not establish anything about the kind of villain that he is that we did not already know. It is needless and it is cruel, especially, as I said, after you firmly establish that there are children on that planet, and then you have the nerve to make a whole big deal of them rescuing these children and all these animals off the high evolutionary ship, which they should do, to be clear. I'm not advocating for leaving the children and the animals behind. I'm saying you don't get to completely disregard with like one line of dialogue of acknowledgement, like, what kind of madman would do that, but then never fully acknowledge the loss of life there again, and then make a big heroic thing out of this. That ticked me off. I'm really at a point. And like, I'm not saying nobody can die in movies. Of course they can. But that level, especially when you have established children and you kill them that casually, that unacknowledged, and it is not given weight, proper, full emotional weight from the characters within narrative, just don't do it. You didn't have to. It does nothing to benefit the story. Hell, you could have just had the high evolutionary abandon them. Like, they'll die out on their own. Have them not bother. Or just say that, like, it's next thing on his to-do list, and you could have the entire showdown happen in orbit around this planet. There was no need for this. Nothing benefits from it. Nothing about him as a character, nothing about the narrative, nothing. It is needless and it is cruel, and I don't like it. And if you're telling me I'm being overly sensitive about a bunch of fictional animal people in a movie, yes, I am. But this shit bothers me. And maybe I'm the only one. I don't care if I'm the only one. It genuinely bothers me. It's another thing that takes me out of the story. Because if the idea was to make me mad at the high evolutionary for doing it, I'm not mad at him, James. I'm mad at you for writing it. Because as I said, it tells me nothing new about him as a character. It doesn't give me any new reasons to hate him as a character. Everything that this establishes about why he's hateable was already established better with the flashback stuff. So no, I don't hate him more. I'm just mad at you. There's some other decent stuff in there. I like Cosmo. Cosmo was good. And, you know, there's good interactions, good moments. But overall, I'm mixed leaning negative. But again, to reiterate, Rocket stuff, even the whole he's about to die and he goes to heaven and there's his friends, but they're like, but it's not your time yet, and they send him back. Like, that's such a cliche and it's so cheesy. I didn't care. I loved it. And I knew it was going to happen. I called it. I still loved it. So the stuff with Rocket, gangbusters. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Works really, really well. Stuff with Gamora was exactly what it should have been. You avoided a lot of minefields on that. High Evolutionary works well for a good chunk of it. The character dynamics are still pretty good, but there's these little nitpicks, and some of which just happen to hit a nerve. Because again, that planet doesn't matter. This is not something I should be getting hung up on, but I am. So, what can you do? And where every character ended felt good. The last 5 minutes or so, that felt like a good place to wrap up. Felt like everyone went into a good place as a character. So it's not like I want to chuck the whole thing out. I want to get Adam Warlock out of it. I want to make some adjustments to the stuff in the middle. I want to keep the ending basically as is. So there's plenty of good here, but there's a lot of stuff that just really hampered my enjoyment of this. And one of two things is going to happen in the future. Either I will get over it and these things will bother me less on subsequent viewings down the line, or they will sink their claws into me and latch on and they will bother me more every time. I don't know which one it'll be. We'll find out eventually. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills. Enables me to do this as my living, even if you can't help me out that way. Like, share, and subscribe are all big helps to me. But even if you can't do that, don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. Massive thanks to my Patreon supporters, and in particular, I want to thank Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Jen, Leotha Boyd, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Fernabilex the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Caspero, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, David Hall, Shayla Gourlay, and Rosalind Bennett. Thanks for your support. You can get your name in the credits too if you feel like hearing me possibly struggle with it for several times before getting it right.